Hello YouTube, Chrome Freak here. I got a special treat for you guys today. This is a video, I don't know, for probably the last 2 weeks I've been really looking forward to making. I got a good friend of mine right here, John, and let me get up a little close here. Can you guys guess what this is? Can you see what I'm looking at right here? I'm going to call this a Dragunov, a real Dragunov. And we know what this is. It's another fine rifle. It's an awesome rifle. But a little pet peeve of mine, it is not in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion, a Dragunov. But what do I know? I'm going to turn it over to my friend here, John. I call him the AK specialist. This guy's a walking encyclopedia on firearms, especially military firearms and those of the red kind. So here's my friend John.
Hi everybody. Thank you, Mike, for the nice introduction, and hope you don't mind that I just called you Mike. You called me John. I think everybody kind of knows who you are. But an AK specialist, maybe just a little bit of one. I don't profess to be. I like to read up a lot on the subject just to facilitate my own collecting. And our motivation today for making this video is because when I first met Mike on the job site, he had this incredible pet peeve, and it just used to make me laugh. He'd always say, "Oh, I hate it when people call these Romanian Dragunovs a Dragunov. It's not a Dragunov." And I said, well, you know, I've got a rifle that I think we can say safely is in a Dragunov family. And I also have a PSL. So why don't we do a video and we show folks the differences between them and try to illustrate how these weapons are different. And if people want to then, after the video, call their PSL a Dragunov, fine and dandy. But maybe we can get rid of that misnomer and show you that the thought process that went into designing each of these weapons is totally different. Only one of them is in the Dragunov family of weapons, and the other weapon, the PSL, is actually in the AK family.
Really?
Yes. So I think what we should do first is maybe talk a little bit about the PSL rifle first, and let people know that with anything that comes out of Eastern Europe, there are some variations of this gun that you can get in the United States of America. What we have for the comparison purposes is a PSL that was manufactured 100% in Romania and imported as a complete weapon. Now there are two other types of PSLs that are on the market here in the United States of America that are assembled from parts kits. And they are either assembled on a Romanian receiver or they are assembled on an American-made receiver. And these weapons often have to comply with Section 922 because the American-made weapons will often have their bayonet lugs on them and some of the other evil features that are not allowed. So if you want to have a gun in that configuration, you have to comply with Section 922. This particular gun that came from Romania, as it is imported, it is missing its bayonet lug. But because it has a thumbhole style stock on it, according to the BATF, it is importable in the condition that you see it right here. So again, three types of PSLs available on the market in America, either assembled completely in Romania, so a complete Romanian gun, including the fire control group, which is just a semi-automatic Romanian fire control group, or two types of USA assembled guns. One is a Romanian parts kit on a Romanian receiver, and the other is a Romanian parts kit on an American-made receiver. So if you're in the market for this type of weapon, be sure to ask exactly what you're getting and what you're buying. Now, for our Dragunov type rifle down here, for our comparison, we don't want to have a whole bunch of people writing in, because I'm sure you've got some educated folks out there who are looking at this gun right now and saying, well, wait a minute, it's close to a Dragunov.
They look similar.
It looks similar, very similar, but it's not quite a Dragunov sniping rifle, and there's a reason for that. The first reason is, I'm not rich. And the second reason is that a Dragunov sniping rifle in full military configuration from the Russian Federation or from the former Soviet Union is extremely rare here in the United States of America. To my knowledge, there are probably 124 or less real official Dragunov sniping rifles in the hands of collectors in the United States of America. And prior to 1994, there were probably less than 10. What happened in 1994 is kind of one of the great stories of collecting military firearms. A small importer out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they were KBI Incorporated or something to that effect, obtained a license to import full military configuration Russian Dragunov sniping rifles from the Russian Federation. The BATF classified the guns as curio and relics, and they could come into the country in full military configuration, bayonets, flash hiders, Dragunov-style stocks, handguards. They came with full military accessories, a 4-pack of magazines, the scope, a cleaning kit, accessories for the scope, a bayonet. It was the whole 9 yards. KBI originally entered into agreement to import 1,000 of these guns into the United States of America, and importation started in 1994. They advertised heavily in Shotgun News. They had a lot of pre-sales on these guns. They managed to get 99 in the country before importation was halted, and I'm not sure why it was halted. But currently, despite the fact that the Russian Dragunov, an Izmash-made Russian Dragunov, is still on the BATF list for curio and relic firearms, these weapons are not imported into the United States of America, and that is due to a gentleman's agreement, so to speak, a voluntary agreement between the Russian Federation and the United States of America.
So let me get this straight then. There's an actual agreement that legally Russia could import, or an importer in the States here could import true Dragunovs, but for some reason there is an agreement between Russia and the United States that they will not do that.
That is correct. The Russian Federation just doesn't want to send us or sell us the rifles. And like I said, it is a purely voluntary agreement, and it was enacted by the Russian Federation, believe it or not. So the Dragunov, very rare in the United States of America. If we can safely say that there were 10 or fewer before 1994, in 1994 we got 99 in. We're now up to 109 real Russian Dragunovs in the United States of America. And that was it for the longest time. And really, I was quite shocked to find this out. But in doing some homework to talk about these guns for you folks today, was poking around on the internet and actually found out that it was either middle of last year or late last year, 14 additional Dragunov sniping rifles, real Russian Dragunov rifles, were released for private sales in the United States by, of all people, by the U.S. Army. And I'm really confused and don't have a lot of information on how or why this came about. But I did notice, end of last year on Gunbroker, I saw 2 rifles come up for sale, and they were not the KBI guns. So I started poking around and went to another auction site, which is Rock Island Auctions, and saw 3 more Dragunovs that were for sale on there.
These were real Dragunovs.
Real Russian Dragunovs. They were all mid-1980s production guns, and they saw heavy use. They were probably Iraqi bringbacks. They had some of their accessories. Most of them had at least a scope and a magazine, and they all went for over $8,000.
Wow.
So if we don't have the real Russian Dragunov to compare, we've got probably what most collectors will consider to be the next best thing. And this gun that you're looking at right now is actually called a Tiger carbine. It is manufactured at the Izmash plant in Russia. Tiger carbines are a sporterized hunting version of a Dragunov sniping rifle. They are for sale in Europe. They're popular in New Zealand. And Izmash goes through great lengths to sell these as sporting rifles, chambering them in all types of sporting rounds, even 30-06. But our gun today that we're looking at here is in its original caliber, which is 7.62 by 54R. And these guns were imported roughly about the same time that the KBI real Dragunovs are being imported. These were all imported early to mid-90s. There were 4 importers on the West Coast that brought in Tiger carbines. They managed to get about 2,200, 22 to 2,500 is sort of the number that floats around out there for total number of weapons imported under the Tiger carbine family.
Well, let me see if I can understand this. This Tiger carbine right here is essentially a sporterized version of a true Dragunov rifle.
That is correct.
Heart and soul.
That is correct. It is produced at the Izmash factory. It is, for all intent, a Dragunov rifle with a few minor differences. It has a shorter barrel than a standard issue Dragunov rifle. A standard issue Dragunov is about 27 inches, I believe. This is about a 20-inch barrel. And when this gun was imported into the country, it had a thumbhole stock, did not have a flash hider on it, did not have slotted handguards. But because the body of the weapon is a Dragunov, the receiver is the same, the internals are the same, the barrel and gas system are roughly the same. Many people like myself go through the process, because this is part of the fun of collecting these red guns. We go through the process of remilitarizing them. So the gun as we see it here has got a proper military stock on it. It has proper military handguards on it. And it has a proper SVDS. The S stands for the side folding variation of the SVD, the Dragunov sniping rifle. It has a proper SVDS flash hider on the front of it. And the reason I chose to do that is it's a little bit shorter flash hider, and the SVDS has got a shorter barrel than a regular Dragunov sniping rifle. Since I was stuck with the short barrel, I decided to put the short barrel Dragunov flash hider on it. It has its Russian Dragunov bipod, Russian scope. It's, like I said, it's the second closest thing that we can get to having a real Dragunov sniping rifle here without being broke.
Is there a reason they're still not importing these Tiger carbines?
I really don't have an answer for you on that. I suppose they could. Just people just aren't. Either these weren't a hot seller, or the ATF has taken them off the list of what's importable, so you have to go through the whole process of submitting a weapon and getting a ruling again. I really don't know. We're not firearms importers here, we're just firearms enthusiasts.
I would tend to believe the latter, because I know that put on the market at an affordable price, this is a rifle I would grab in a heartbeat.
Yeah, these weren't too bad. Were the KBI original Dragunovs, full military configuration, when they were new, were about $5,500. This was about an $1,100 weapon. But real quick, let's get to the third rifle in the Dragunov family that is available in the United States of America. And this is the Chinese copy, and most of you will know the name out there. These were called NDM-86, and they were brought into the United States of America as early as 1984. A company called Navy Arms out on the West Coast began importing them. And the Chinese weapons were, again, they were full military configuration with flash hiders, bayonet lugs. Came with the bayonet, the accessory package, full military configuration, but the country of origin, China, kind of puts them third on the hierarchy list. There were about 2,500 NDM 86s brought into the United States, 500 of which were in NATO 308. They were never big sellers. CDNN sales had NATO 308 guns brand new in the box up until about 2002, when they finally sold out. The 7.62 by 54R Chinese Dragunovs are much more popular, and I just don't have an interest in Chinese guns, so I've got the Russian version here.
Gotcha.
So that should give everybody an overview of the two weapons that we're looking at here. We're looking at a Romanian manufactured PSL rifle. We're looking at a Russian manufactured Tiger carbine, which is in the Dragunov family, and we're going to show you why it is here in a second. But again, to break down this misnomer that this PSL rifle is a Dragunov rifle, we need to do this comparison. And I think what we're going to start with is maybe showing people, their similarities and why there is this misnomer.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Obviously, both weapons are intended to do the same thing. They're both designated marksmanship rifles issued at the squad level, and they're just designed to give the squad a little bit more firepower. They fire the same cartridge, the 7.62 by 54R. They're both semi-automatic. They both feed and fire from a 10-round detachable box magazine. They both have an optics leaf on the left side of the rifle. They're capable of mounting a variety of Russian and Eastern Bloc issued scopes and sighting systems, night scopes, day scopes, red dots, whatever they want to put on there. As long as it has the Russian standard base, the scopes will fit on their intended rails. And they look very similar. Both these weapons have got slatted forward handguards, and they both have a laminate wood, what they call Dragunov style stock, that has been highly skeletonized, and this is simply for weight savings. So based on external appearances and the fact that they do the same thing, they shoot the same round, many people would say, well, hey, look, they're both Dragunov rifles. But I think what we want to get in people's heads through this video is this educational process here, that what it means to be Dragunov versus what it means to be PSL really boils down to the guts of these weapons. That there's massive differences in the receiver types and in the internals. And what that reflects is a difference in the designer's thought process in which these weapons were conceived and built and put into practice. So why don't we start here just by looking at each rifle's magazine here, because if two guns are really the same thing, if they're really both Dragunovs, then you would think that the magazines would interchange.
Yeah.
These magazines don't, and so that's our first clue that something is really different here. If we look at the Dragunov magazine and compare it to the PSL magazine, and I hope we can get this, the locking lugs on the front are just a little bit different, and the locking lugs on the rear are a little bit different. Each magazine does have a device that activates a last round bolt hold open. And the easiest way to tell these two magazines apart, and again they won't interchange, I cannot put this magazine into the PSL. It will not fit. The easiest way to tell these magazines apart is by the stampings on their side. The PSL will always have this big X on it, and I just like to simply say, you know, when I see a big X on the side of a magazine like that, that to me says, wrong, I'm not a Dragunov magazine. I'm a PSL magazine. And because these weapons may be encountered in the same theater, since these were both Warsaw Pact nations at one point in time, I really think that these magazines were made with these characteristic stampings to really tell them apart. So hopefully everybody, when they're going to gun shows or when they're online and they see the big X, they know that that is the magazine for the PSL. And when they see sort of the waffle pattern, that this is the magazine for a Dragunov. And again, they are not interchangeable. And the fact that they're not interchangeable, again, it says something about the guns being very different. Let's look at both these stocks really quickly for a second, because it's an external feature, and you know, one stock or another doesn't necessarily make one a Dragunov or not. But just
see if we can get them a little bit closer.
Sure.
Together.
Does that help out?
Yes, it does.
Both stocks are laminated plywood that have been heavily skeletonized simply to save weight. And the quickest way to tell the difference between a real Dragunov stock and a PSL stock is to look at the comb area of the stock. To properly align the shooter's eye on the PSL, the comb of the stock has been worked up here. It's this rise is built into the stock. You can see that they just machine this profile in here so that the shooter's eye is aligned to the scope. Okay, that's kind of nice if you've got a scope. If you lose your scope and you have to use your iron sights, you're going to have to really squinch down on this stock to get your eye to line up.
I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, the Russians have a little bit different concept here. What they do is they keep the comb flat, and then to properly align your eye with the scope, they supply the stock with this detachable leather cheek riser. Of course, the drawback to this is if you lose this, then you don't get a very good cheek weld when you're losing your scope.
Gotcha. And that just simply clamps on.
That just simply clamps on, so that can be removed if you wanted to use your iron sights. But for the most part, it stays with the gun. It's I mean, it is rigid. It's very difficult to get that to clamp on and off. Another difference between the two butt stocks is the PSL has got, this is kind of innovative. It has this stamped steel butt pad here, but it is actually spring loaded. It's got a shock absorber. It's got a pin and a washer here that captures the backside of the pin here. And there is a spring in here, and it is attached to the rear of the buttstock. And if I can do this, it's quite stiff, but that will actually move. I think you can maybe see that moving about 1/8 of an inch. But that is a recoil absorbing butt pad there. It's got a little shock absorber in it. Whereas the Dragunov sniping rifle stock will either simply have a stamped metal plate that's attached to the wood, or will have a short recoil pad like this. So again, they're minor cosmetic differences, but once you get used to looking at this stock versus this stock, you kind of know where you're at.
It's also kind of for function too. When you get into the heart and soul of this, you'll be explaining, I think, why that might have a spring-loaded.
Yeah, Mike brings up a good part, and it's a good teaser, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Moving forward on these weapons, let's take a look at the difference in handguards, because again, to just the novice person sitting here looking at these, they might look completely similar, but in fact they're dissimilar. On a PSL, because it is in a completely different family of rifle than the Dragunov, it actually has an upper and a lower handguard, and they are not symmetrical. The upper handguard covers a long gas tube, and it is much shorter than the lower handguard.
Very AK-ish.
Very AK-ish with upper and lower handguard. Slotted to help cooling. On a true Dragunov rifle, we actually have symmetrical handguards. We have left and right. If I turn the weapon up like this, you can see that they're split down the middle. They're symmetrical. We've got left and right side handguards, not top and bottom. And that's because what's underneath these handguards isn't an AK style gas tube. Now there's some other minor differences here at the end of the weapons here. Like I said, I have got an SVDS style flash hider on this weapon. It's for the folding stock version of the Dragunov sniping rifle, which has a shorter barrel, so I elected to put this much more difficult to find short flash hider on it. But in true military configuration, on a standard Dragunov, you would have the long flash hider with a bayonet lug that is attached to the unit. So the flash hider, bayonet lug, and sight hood are all one unit on a Dragunov. On a PSL, the flash hider, front sight, and the bayonet lug would actually be back here. It's a band that clamps on the barrel and is riveted, pressed on there. Those are three distinct units. You would have your bayonet lug, which would be about back here. You have your front sight base, and then you have a front sight or a front muzzle brake / flash hider that actually on the military rifle is indexed. The barrel is threaded, and you would depress the detent up here and take this on and off, just like you would any other AK type muzzle attachment.
Just quickly, this is going to be quite a long video, just to let you guys know, but it's, I believe, an important one and one that needs to be told. I don't think there's another video on YouTube that is showing, in my opinion, a true Dragunov rifle compared to a PSL. So, yeah, we're just going to go with it, and I hope you enjoy it.
All right, let's get to the real differences between these two weapons, and to do that, just to make things easier to handle, I'm going to just pull the scopes off really quick. Maybe this is where Mike does some editing, because who wants to see scopes coming off of rifles?
Oh, I do. I enjoy everything about them.
All right, so next thing we're going to talk about is the receiver group on these rifles, because here's where we really start to see the differences in the design. And since we're going to be taking guns apart, what we ought to do is we ought to do a quick safety check here. No rounds in the chamber. No rounds in the chamber. So that way when we start tearing guns apart, we don't get yelled at by any of the safety folks out there. All right, let's take a look. Let's start with the PSL here, because this is kind of neat here. The PSL actually employs stamped sheet metal construction for making its receiver, and the receiver is held together with rivets. The sheet steel for the receiver is 1.5 millimeters thick, and a real characteristic feature of this receiver is these large bulges on either side here at the front of the receiver, just below the charging handle. And on the other side, we have the identical bulge just forward of the optic sleeve here. And what these bulges do is they house the front trunnion for the barrel. And a trunnion is just a fancy way of saying mounting block. Because this is a piece of sheet steel that starts out flat, all the holes for the magazine and all the holes for the trigger and the holes for the fire control pins, they're all punched out in it. This thing is flat, then it goes to a die, and it's folded into a U-shaped receiver. That configuration isn't very good for mounting a barrel to. There's nothing solid in the front of this thing to mount a barrel to. So what they do is they machine a trunnion for the barrel, and you can see this is part of the trunnion right here. The barrel is pressed into it, and here's the barrel cross pin. To secure the trunnion to the sheet steel receiver, they rivet it in there. And the trunnion on this gun is wider than the sheet steel receiver is in this area, and so they have to press these bulges into it to help facilitate the trunnion. And the reason the trunnion is so large in this is because we have this big long heavy barrel and we're firing this big heavy round. So the trunnion not only supports the barrel, but it also provides the solid block in which the rotating lugs of the bolt face lock into to facilitate firing the weapon. So this trunnion has to be a big beefy piece, and to fit it into this receiver, they've knocked out these recesses in it. They've punched out these bulges to facilitate that. So this is one of the key characteristics in identifying a PSL rifle, is we have sheet steel construction with trunnion bulges to facilitate the large front trunnion and the rivet construction. If we go to the back of the receiver, again, to facilitate rigidity, we see that we've got these nice reinforcing plates that have been riveted to the rear of the receiver. These two rivets also hold the rear trunnion in place, and again, a trunnion is just a fancy name for a mounting block, and this mounting block holds the rear stock in place, and it also helps secure the recoil spring assembly in the top of the weapon. The fire control group for this gun rests on pins that are placed through the side of the receiver, and there's one here for the trigger and the sear, and there's one here for the hammer. The trigger guard is stamped sheet steel, and it is riveted to the bottom of the receiver here. And if we compare this now to the Dragunov family of weapons, the first thing that we notice is we don't have any trunnion bulges. The second thing that we notice is we don't have any rivets. Yeah. There's no rivets on this gun, and that's because there's no trunnions.
It's a solid milled piece.
You've got it. We have a solid milled receiver that starts out as a forging, and then it is milled into shape, and so we don't require a rigid mounting block in the front of the gun to mount a barrel to, because we can simply machine it in this part of the receiver. Therefore, the area where the bolt locking lugs lock into are also machined into that receiver. We don't need a rear trunnion either for a stock, because we can simply mill tangs in the receiver to attach the stock to. Gotcha. The other thing that's interesting is if we look at the bottom of this, if we look at this fire control group, we notice that there's no cross pins for it going through the receiver. The fire control group on a true Dragunov rifle is actually in a separate detachable housing. If I were to pull this pin out right here, and there's another pin, I believe it's which the safety passes through, this whole unit will drop out of the gun, and it's a self-contained trigger group, just sort of like an M1 Garand or an M1 carbine. It just looks a lot different, but those trigger packs come right out. This has got a trigger pack in the same manner. That allows this trigger unit to be manufactured very carefully, and it's a little bit different design than this group here, giving a better trigger pull. Now, if we turn these guns over, we can see a real benefit of having a milled receiver versus a stamped sheet metal receiver, and that is in how the optic leafs are attached. If we go over to the PSL and we look at its optic leaf, we notice that it's a separate individual component that is attached to the gun via rivets. Whereas on a true Dragunov family rifle, we see that the optic sleeve is actually it's machined. It is machined right out of the side of the receiver. In other words, when this forging came out of the forge, it had a raised area of metal right here, and all this work is machined. So this is one piece right here, whereas on a PSL we have two pieces. We have the sheet steel receiver, and we have the individual piece that is riveted to the side to hold the optics. Now, if you were a marksman and you wanted to put money on which type of mounting platform is going to be more rigid, more solid, and more stable, would you choose a weapon that has the optics rail milled into the side of a solid steel receiver, or would you select a weapon that has an optics rail that is riveted to the side of a stamped sheet metal receiver?
It's kind of a no-brainer.
So here is one of the key points of the design differences between the PSL rifle and the Dragunov rifle. Which do you think is more expensive and time consuming to make? A milled steel receiver or a stamped sheet metal receiver?
Yeah.
It's the milled receiver. But it also gives you a much more stable platform, and it enhances accuracy. So the receiver of this gun, I think I can safely say, has been designed and is manufactured using tools and principles that lead to accuracy, whereas this gun, stamped sheet steel construction, bolt-on components, that's telling me that this gun is really being manufactured for ease of manufacture, for simplicity. Let's crank them out. This type of design does not generally optimize accuracy, where this type of receiver design does.
A gun built for a true sniper rifle.
With that process in mind. As we get further inside the weapons here, we start to see some even greater differences. If we look at the back of the PSL, we have a standard AK looking top cover, but we also got sort of a standard looking AK top cover on a Dragunov. But there's one quick difference we want to point out. We notice that we've got the recoil spring assembly poking through the back of the dust cover on the PSL, and there's nothing here on the Dragunov. So something very different is going on here with the recoil mechanism in this gun versus this gun. And let's take a look at that right now. So I'm going to pull that cover off.
Wow, that looks familiar.
Doesn't that look familiar? And I'm going to take this up, and you know, speaking like, you know, here's our rivets that we got a reinforcing plate on here, and if I get this, remember everybody knows how to do this because just about everybody's taking part in AK. There's a standard looking recoil spring assembly, and here is the machined rear trunnion that has been riveted to the receiver, and we can see now how it facilitates holding the rear stock in place via these two screws, and we can see that it's got this dovetail milled in it here to hold the recoil assembly, and gee, that looks very much like an AKM. If we go a little bit further here and we take out our bolt and bolt carrier group, we see that on a PSL, the gas piston, operating rod, and bolt carrier are all one unit. And here's the rotating bolt. And we're not going to get into too much how this actually works. I mean, you've got this groove here, this cam groove here, which rides on this lug right here for the bolt.
But I think most of my subscribers are very familiar with the AK platform. And
good. So we've got a rotating bolt. That this is, you know, this is unlocked. This is locked. And now if we compare all these internals to our Dragunov rifle here, we're going to see some astounding differences.
No, I can't wait to see the inside of this.
Have you ever seen the inside, Film Freak?
It's been a while. Another buddy of mine, I think, was lucky enough to be one of the guys that owned one of those original imports you were talking about earlier.
The KBI guns, oh, that would be exciting. So here is the inside of a Dragunov family dust cover. We'll notice that we don't have, the rear part of the receiver is not what holds the recoil spring assembly. It is actually the dust cover itself, and that is the reason for this reinforcing sheet metal band around it. And then this piece right here is what is activated by this lever right here to lock it in place. And if we now take the bolt and bolt carrier group out, we get a nice surprise.
Wow, where's that big gas piston?
Exactly. We see how much smaller and more compact this unit is. But what's important is that it's lighter, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, to look at the gas system on this rifle, where we pretty much have the piston right here, we've got to take off the front hand guards. So I'm going to sit down to do this. There's a button right here that I need to press. This comes forward. And I may need this small screwdriver to just very gently loosen this up.
And by the way, this Tiger carbine right here, except for maybe the test firing at the factory, has never had a round down its chamber, has it?
No, unfortunately. Well, some people would think it's unfortunate. It's a safe queen.
Beautiful.
Forward, and then I'm just going to use this to pry on these a little bit here to get them separated. A little more prying. Be careful not to damage anything. There's our left. There's our right. Run out of room.
Wow, look at this. It's beautiful.
And here is our gas piston. And here's our operating rod. Here's our bolt carrier group.
Yeah, I think I could safely say this is not AK-ish.
To that, we have a world of difference.
And this is very AK-ish.
Folks, what you're looking at here is really what it means to be Dragunov versus what it means to be PSL.
This is the heart and soul.
It is. And the reason for these differences are as follows. I can tell you that when you pick this up, it's heavy. The operating principle for this gun is what's called the long stroke gas piston. And this is a Kalashnikov design. I mean, this just looks like an AKM operating rod and bolt carrier on steroids. And the reason that this AK system works so well is because this thing is so heavy. If I take the bolt out of this, one of the things that leads to
great reliability in a firearm is the difference between the mass of this, the bolt carrier, and the bolt itself. The Kalashnikov family of rifles has one of the highest bolt carrier to bolt mass ratios on the planet, and it's why they are so reliable. However, it doesn't make for a very good sniping rifle, because here's what happens in a PSL. When this thing goes boom, this big, long mass, heavy mass, starts shifting rearward, and that tends to set up detrimental harmonics within the gun. It's just big shifting masses don't lead to great accuracy. Ask yourself how much mass is shifting in the world's best sniper rifles. They're all bolt action rifles. So what mass is shifting? Well, the bullet going down the barrel is during firing.
Yes.
The hammer striking the firing pin moving forward, but there isn't much anything else. It's very difficult to make a very accurate semi-automatic sniping rifle because so much stuff is moving to make the semi-automatic action work. When this big thing comes rearward and it finally stops, it stops against the rear of the receiver, completely compresses that recoil spring, and all this stuff stops against the rear of the receiver. And this gun wants to continue going backwards. It's got quite a bit of recoil. It's one of the reasons for the recoil, for the shock absorbing, recoil absorbing butt plate back here.
Yes.
But as a sniper, if you're sitting here and you pull the trigger and all this stuff starts moving and your gun starts moving, it's hard to get a follow-up shot. And it's, again, these large shifting masses just are inherently lead to inaccuracies.
Great reliability.
Great reliability, but poor accuracy. The gun will always work, but it's not as accurate. So the Dragunov principle was, I should say the thought process is entirely different. They recognized that these large shifting masses led to inherently inaccurate rifles, and they said, how in the world can we help overcome this? And so they developed a sniping rifle that uses a short stroke gas piston, very lightweight gas system, very lightweight piston, lightweight operating rod, and they went for as light as possible, a bolt and bolt carrier, but still tried to maintain a decent bolt carrier to bolt mass ratio so that the weapon would operate. And interestingly enough, on a real Russian Dragunov sniping rifle, if we had one of the KBI imports right here, we would actually have an adjustable gas system, much like an FNFAL or some of the other gas guns out on the planet, located right here. The Tiger carbine doesn't come with one. It's one of the little subtle differences between a Tiger carbine and a real Dragunov. But the adjustable gas system on a Dragunov is the same philosophy behind it as any adjustable gas system. When the weapon starts to get dirty, you can turn the gas up a little bit so that the thing does function. Yeah. Does a PSL have an adjustable gas system? No, it does not, because it has an AK type action. This thing is set up to go full bore no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's clean, you're going to get the full Monty. It doesn't matter if it's really dirty, the thing's set up to work. It's more of an AK design.
And work it well.
And definitely work it well. Whereas this gun is a little bit more subtle. When it starts to get dirty, if we had a real one, we could turn it up to make sure that our weapon is still working. Now, the Dragunov has got a tremendous service life. It's loved in the communist world, to be honest with you. It definitely works. But again, it's much more subtle than this rifle over here, and it's built completely different. In fact, now that we've got this opened up, we can kind of see a little bit more of the independent trigger group and the fire control group in there in its own separate housing. We see the housing right here.
Makes for a much more better trigger pull, also improving your accuracy.
It does, versus we have a standard AK type trigger group in here. We've got the wound up hammer spring that comes all the way back. We've got your hammer right here. We've got your trigger and your sear. So the reality of it, folks, is the PSL is an AKM type weapon on steroids. It's just blown up to accept the 7.62 by 54R round. And that was the intent of the designers when they made it. They've put a long barrel on it They've put an optics rail on it. They've beefed the receiver up as much as you can with the reinforcing plates in the back to make it as rigid as possible. They've tried to optimize an AKM design to make it suitable for sniping. And for the most part, they've succeeded. But these features are not Dragunov. They're not even close. They're AKM, and if for folks who are really into the commie guns out there, again, because we have these large trunnion bulges, some people might say, well, with the trunnion bulges and the 1.5 millimeter thick sheet steel receivers, these are probably closer to an RPK family than they are really to the AKM family. And I will certainly give you that. I think so. But when we come over to this weapon and we see the milled receiver, we see the integrated optic sleeve, we see an independent fire control group in its own housing that can be taken out. These can be fine-tuned for trigger pull. We see a completely different operating system, a completely different principle of operation. We want to make the operating system of this gun as light as possible. We want to minimize those large, heavy shifting masses because we know that that inherently leads to harmonics that are detrimental to accuracy. It leads to the gun coming off of target when fired. It leads to big recoil. We want to design a weapon that gets away from that as much as possible, so we design an independent bolt and bolt carrier. We don't put everything together in one big heavy hunking unit. We've got a very light operating rod, a very light gas piston to facilitate helping the weapon work when it's getting dirty. We just don't rely on the brute force like the PSL does. We would actually have an adjustable gas system here. It's a completely different thought process that goes into a Dragunov than went into the PSL. Do they both work? Yeah, you pull the trigger, they go boom. Can you shoot pretty well with each weapon? Yes, you can, but I think at the end of the day, the Dragunov family of guns will outshoot the PSL family of guns, hands down.
I'd have to agree with you. I was lucky enough to actually shoot a Dragunov, maybe 10 rounds, and I will never forget that experience. It is a very, very accurate weapon and a pleasure to shoot. But I don't think you're ever going to put a bullet down the barrel of this one, are you?
Well, someday I might. Maybe if those darn Ruskies would give up their voluntary agreement and allow some real Dragunovs to come in, I'll get a real Dragunov and we'll put this one through its paces. I do belong to a lot of forums online. There are some good ones out there, and there are some ones that have got Russian soldiers. Some of them have fought in Afghanistan, some of them have fought recently in the Middle East, and they're on there and they chime in. And I had one gentleman who said, hey, with his Dragunov sniping rifle, he was very comfortable engaging a human-sized target out to 800 meters and very comfortable engaging vehicles and stuff like that out to 1,000. I mean, it's for what it is for a semi-automatic sniping platform, it is quite accurate. But of the two platforms that we're looking here, it is a much more accurate platform, and it is very different in thought process and construction than a PSL. And I'll tell you what, folks, Americans, God bless us, we're freaking industrious. I was blown away the other day. I was on Gunbroker looking for an adjustable gas system for this gun because I am in the process of remilitarizing it. I need the adjustable gas system. I need a proper rear sight, which I actually have. The Dragunov rear sights are graduated out to 1,200 meters. I've got a sight. Hopefully Chrome Freak's going to help me put it on here in the next few days. But I saw an ad for adapters for a PSL rifle. They were machined out of aluminum or something like that will allow you to mount Dragunov style furniture on the front, and you can get an adapter for the rear to put a Dragunov stock on it. And yeah, that's all great and everything like that. But again, just buyer beware. If you go out there and you see this gun dressed up like this, look for the trunnion bulges, look for the rivet construction. Don't let people tell you that these guns are Dragunovs. And I'm not trying to say that the people who are manufacturing those are trying to fool people. I think there's just folks out there who just want to make these guns look a little bit more Russian. But it doesn't make it a Dragunov. None of the external features on this gun, no matter how similar they are to the Dragunov, it doesn't make it a Dragunov. It's like going and buying a Honda Accord and then running over to the Ferrari dealership and ponying up, what, $1,500 for the Ferrari emblem and sticking it on your Honda Accord. You're not driving a Ferrari. You're driving a Honda Accord with a Ferrari emblem on it.
I have to agree with you. My hope is that after people watch this video, and the PSL, in my opinion, is a fine rifle, But my hope is they will never, ever call the PSL a Dragunov again.
Yeah, let's just call it a PSL. And then for those of you who are watching this now, hopefully you've got an understanding of what it is and what it means to be Dragunov, and what the thought process that went into the gun, and you see the differences in construction. And I'll tell you, if you're interested in getting these types of weapons, the Tiger carbines, there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 that come up for sale each year. They're a little bit pricey, but if you can afford a gun and you can get into it, I think they're really neat. I say go for it. To remilitarize them now is very easy. When I started this project of remilitarizing this gun, these stocks and handguards were just impossible to get, and you kind of got what you got. So I've got a very dark stock and very light handguards. Now the stock sets are all over the place. Very easy to get. The rear sights are very obtainable. The adjustable gas systems right now are a little bit hard, but the front sight bases, the long flash hiders for the Dragunov, and I wish we had a picture, are available all over the place. The short flash hider that I have on here, I've only seen about 3 or 4 Tigers dressed up with these. These are very rare in the United States because, again, that flash hider came off the SVDS, which is the side-folding stock variation of the Dragunov sniping rifle, and it actually has a shorter barrel. It has about a 20-inch barrel, and I chose that flash hider because the Tiger came with a shorter barrel, and I said, you know what, that will look a little bit more correct on the end of it, a little bit more compact unit. So, Chrome Freak, do you have anything to add here? I'll stop babbling. Let people just kind of look at the parts and enjoy them. I had a good time making this video. I hope I don't tank your YouTube ratings for 45 minutes of mindless babble.
I believe most of the guys that watch my channel and gals are firearm enthusiasts like I am, and I've learned a lot here today. And I hope that they also learned a lot today. And I'm just happy that I found you as a friend. You're an unbelievable resource when it comes to firearms, and a good friend, and I just appreciate it. I thank you for doing this. And you guys got any questions at all on the Dragunov, on a PSL, or any AK platform rifle, or any military rifle for that matter, huh, John? American or foreign, feel free to ask, and we'll try to get back to you. And we're going to have a few more videos coming out. I wished I could tell you that we were going to take this to the range and shoot it, but I don't think I'm going to be able to convince John to do that. But we'll see. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Goodbye, YouTube. Say goodbye, John.
All right, goodbye, guys. And Mike, thanks for having me. And I hope, look, this is my first video, everybody. Going through it, I'm sure if I listened to it, I might have misspoken. I might have called, something different. Hopefully, no one's gonna clam slam us here. And then maybe this. How about we do this? I know that some people might know what an FN49 is, and some people might know what an FNFAL are. Maybe you guys can chime in, and we'll see if we get enough thumbs up on it. Maybe the next comparison video we'll do will be looking at those two rifles.
Oh, that would be fantastic. All right, guys, I'm sorry the video took so long, but there was a lot to go over. And if you love firearms like I love firearms, this was a history lesson, and just a pleasure. I want to keep going, and we probably could keep going. We condensed this down, actually, but we could probably go for another hour and a half talking about this. Anyway, guys, thank you, and good night, YouTube.